morning, everyone. Hello, good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Jeannie Shim. I am one of the organizers of this event. Thanks for being here, you guys. So this event is by the Total Youth Productions. Was anyone a part of it before? TYP? Let me see that hand. Hannah and Eugene, Yewon. So those three girls, they were a part of it before, a few years ago when it was more active. So later, throughout today, if you have more questions about it, you can ask them. And also, I will hope to tell you guys more info about that organization before you leave today, so you can look forward to the next event and just know what it is. So welcome once again to the Total Youth Productions event. This is a leadership talk and roundtable discussion. So we have a very special guest speaker, Mr. Philip on Cuddy. He goes by the name Flip. Flip, hello, he's right there. Thank you for coming here. So today you will learn more about Dosan and Chang, as you can see on the screen here, and Susan on Cuddy. And so before we start by introducing Flip, I would like to introduce a few people we have in this room. So we first of all have Miss 정원서. She's back there. Hello, 안녕하세요. A lot of people call her Editor's Hall because she's the chief editor of Korea Daily, and she founded Total Youth Productions. And we have mentors. We have Professor 정민채. 어디 계세요? And we have Mr. J. Park. We have Stephen Kang. And Mr. Han Kim.
Yeah.
Han is also coming from LA, and you guys have received a sticker, the KoreanAmericanHeritage.com sticker. That's a podcast channel, and he is the host and the creator of that podcast. We also have, let's see, I know we have someone that is not here yet. Ray Im is not here yet, but we have Ms. Erin Lee. Hello. Good meeting you. Yeah. All right. So, and then we have Jessica Quen. And Jessica, I would like to invite you here to the stage because I would like for her to introduce our speaker.
Thank you for the introduction, Jenny. Please excuse me as I read my script on my phone. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We're really excited for each and every one of you to be here. The organizers have put in a lot of love in creating this event because this is the type of event we wanted to see when we were growing up. So it's truly a pleasure to have put on this event for all of you here today. So, my sophomore year of college, I graduated last year. I went to a week-long leadership camp. And all these cool, accomplished Korean American pioneers in various fields came to speak to us. And Susan on Cuddy and Flip, her son, were one of the keynote speakers for one of the days. And there's a picture of me with them and our entire college group with them. So before the camp, I did read their stories and their bios, and so I was fully aware of the gravity of the situation when they came to the camp and how I was basically going to be a part of history, that I crossed paths with these historical figures. So I was very grateful that Susan came to see us because first, it was a 2-hour drive to come to the mountain to see like 10 of us. And second, she was 100 years old, so driving up to the mountain was probably a trek. And I really appreciated that she had such a tremendous passion for reaching out to the youth. And she had such a focused sense of duty to share her life story. And listening to her and hearing her, seeing her in person was really life-changing because growing up, I did not have a Korean American strong female role model to look up to. So when I finally saw her in the flesh, it was like a real life proof of concept that you can really break one record at a time in the career of your choice through like sheer force of will. And mind you, everything that she did in her life was predating the U.S. civil rights movement and the push to have women in the workforce. So she had to jump through a lot of like racial, patriarchal, misogynistic hurdles, and that did not stop her at all from becoming like the first Asian American officer in the U.S. Navy and the first gunnery officer and the first like Asian American woman naval intelligence officer. So she did a lot of crazy cool stuff that really helped liberate Korea from Japanese imperialism and defend the United States during World War II. So she was like a very tough lady, but when she came to the camp, she was very at peace, very welcoming, approachable, lovable, and I could really feel that she was very present and strong in her mind. And she was talking about her life story, and one thing that really resonated with me, and a concept I never really heard of, was her quote, "To be a good leader, they are not going to look for you. You have to get it out of yourself." So up to that point, I was just kind of going through college like, oh, there are so many problems, and I'm sure other people are going to take care of it. But when she said that quote, I was like, oh, wait. I kind of need to take responsibility and be really active in the community I'm living in and serving in. So that really changed my mindset, and from that point, I served as a leader in my campus, and I was more up to the challenge to take challenging roles to figure out solutions for problems that people faced. So a day after the camp, when I met her, she passed away at 100 years old, and I was able to volunteer at her funeral. So I feel like it was such a loss for me since I met her and she was like a role model, but she passed away too soon. So I was really sad about that. But we're really delighted that Flip could come here 3 years later in her place to kind of share her story, because he of all people know her story and Korean history like more than anyone I've ever known. So I'm really, really excited that he's here to talk about Korean history and Korean American pioneers. So it's such a treat for him to be here. So thank you for coming up again, a 2-hour drive like last time to come to speak with students. We really appreciate your time and presence. If you could please put your hands together to have a warm welcome to invite Flip to the stage. I'm going to play the video. I'm sorry if the volume is loud. Let me turn it down if it is. Sorry.
이 사진에 대한 설명이 좀 있습니다. 제가 좀 읽어드리면, 일제가 국내 행사단을 말살하기 위해서 동호회회원 약 150명을 검거할 때 도산은 6월 28일 체포돼서 11월 1일 서대문 형무소에 입감이 되셨고요. 그리고 선생님께서는 12월 24일 출감 후에 당시에 경성대 부속병원, 지금 현재 서울대 병원입니다. 1938년 3월 10일에 순국하셨습니다. 이 사진은 순국하시기 4개월 전에 찍으신 사진이라고 설명이 되어 있네요.
You know, they let him out of Soremun prison and put him in the hospital because they figured if he died in the prison, it would make people more upset and they would start another revolution. Yeah, his whole life was for Korea and Koreans and independence.
Absolutely.
Why?
This is a video of Susan now.
Absolutely.
Why?
Well, a double fold. I was Korean blood. We were fighting the Japanese. I was American. Very American. Raised to love and honor America. There was no choice. I think that was it. Why other women didn't do it, I don't know.
My generation, or your grandkids' generation?
Oh, I think overall maybe because the world program showed the world what women were able to do outside of their housekeeping home. And
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
All right.
Good morning. Is it too loud? I could probably speak without a microphone, but I'm really grateful that TYP and Jenny and Jessica put this event together. I've been studying Korean history and actually living Korean history all my life, but mainly studying since 1984. But, you know, I say fate chooses our relatives and we choose our friends. I mean, I don't look Korean. You know, most people think I'm Hispanic or Hawaiian or something else. So when I walk down the street or I'm in the Korean community, no one hardly ever says, oh, you're Dosan's grandson, or oh, you're Susan's son. So it's been interesting to be Korean and Irish. But my grandfather is probably one of the greatest historical figures in your heritage. Whether you're born here or born in Korea, Dosan is part of your heritage. If he didn't do what he did, most likely you would all have Japanese last names today. He's the one that's responsible for putting together the independence movement. And so I'm going to jam through this stuff because it's 140 years in 45 minutes or so. So I don't expect you to remember everything I tell you. You know, like in, oh, here's some information too. If you need anything, you can email me. If you're doing a history paper or any kind of a thing and you have a question for me, I'll answer your email. There's a website, onchangho.org. Jessica, who you met, she's the one that engineered that. And it's got a different perspective. You know, I'm an old man and my Dosan.org is a network solutions template. And so it's outdated, but Jessica's is a new one that we're working on. And then my mom's is susanonCuddy.com. And then there's Facebook pages. And then, of course, as you heard before, there's the podcast that Hans set up. Like, you know, I talk a lot about history. Some of it's controversial. And there's other episodes with other people, like Han just did one with a Korean-American musician named Azra. And I think some of you are aware of her. She's been involved in the community before. So, Socrates. I can't teach you anything. I'm here to make you think. So that's what I want you to do, to look at everything I tell you today and just think about it, because there's a lot of stuff here. And then the other thing is there's a lot of stuff that people tell you about Dosan Onchangho that's not true. And one of the people that abuses my grandfather's history the most is Professor Ed Taeyong Chang from UC Riverside. And I can explain to you more about that. I have proof, I have documents. I went down to Riverside to confront him. I wrote 68 pages of testimony. He turned in 1 page. I've asked Ed Chang to debate me on Korean history for 10 years. He won't do it. And he's an ethnic studies
person. He's not a historian. My history of ethnic and racist problems is probably one of the most unique in Korean American heritage. He refuses to interview me. And the other thing is the Dosan Memorial Foundation is abusing Dosan. And the other thing that happens too, Moon Jae-in gave a speech on March 1st, 2018, in front of Sodimun Prison, where my grandfather was in there 6 times, didn't mention his name once. August 15th, Pariro, a couple days ago, same thing. Moon Jae-in didn't mention my grandfather's name once. And you'll learn a little bit why. He was a revolutionary. He even wanted to abolish the honorific form of speaking Korean because it felt it stratified society without merit. And being a Christian, the idea of individual merit and worth started to develop when he was opening up schools, and then when the Japanese took over for 35 years, it changed everything. So this is the other saying, your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your character, and your character is your destiny. And for each of you young people, the future is ahead of you, and unfortunately, the President of the United States has a bad character. So right now, your destiny is problematic. And the other thing about Dosan, he was really liberal and modern, and so he felt Koreans didn't smile enough. And so he had a whole theory on smile. And then when you went to his house in North Korea, we're North Koreans. Korea was one Korea back then, but I'm Pyongyang blood. Half of me is Pyongyang blood. But on the entrance to his sign, in Korean letters, it says smile. So he wanted people to smile more. But that's just minor, but that's how down to earth he was. So this is his philosophy. Seek the truth, right action, loyalty, and courage. So part of this is critical and independent thinking. And I think the most important thing for your future is to have teachers that teach you how to critically think and be independent in thinking. It totally contradicts traditional Korean education. But seeking the truth, that doesn't, somebody tells you the truth, especially today. In the old days, the ball of truth was this small, the ball of lies was the same size. Because of social media and other technology and things and difference in people's characters, they're lying to you more and more every day. The ball of lies is this big, the ball of truth is the same size. So you have to, not only if you believe something, you really have to study it these days to make sure that it is the truth. And you see a lot of that what goes on around you today. And then these are his character training: self-improvement, lead by example, civic responsibility, and service to others. Those are all leadership things. You'll find these in other, like the YMCA has a similar approach to life. Many people do. But working those things into your life is important. But what's the biggest thing this is leadership. What's the biggest thing a leader needs? Anybody? Just shout out an answer. In your mind, what's the biggest thing a leader needs? Anybody? Okay. That's really important. It's good followers. If you don't have good followers, you can't be a good leader. So not only when you study leadership, you have to study how to be a follower. And a follower also means looking at your leader. If you know what's right and he's not telling you what's right, you tell him he's wrong. Leading and following. So it's just not, I've done leadership programs for 20 years, and I should have done followership programs. So ginseng, here's an odd fact. Okay, in Korean history, they say 1903, January 13th, in the centennial thing, which is now Korean American Day, was the exact day that the first Koreans set foot in America. My grandfather and grandmother came here in 1902. Sojay Pil, the first naturalized Korean American citizen, came here in 1885 and became an American citizen in 1888. The centennial, I worked on the centennial in Hawaii in 1991 and 92. It's all based on illegal immigration. They lied to King Sejong and they broke all kinds of immigration laws, and those people in Hawaii were slaves. 165 people came before that. Now here's this. You all know ginseng. You probably have had it. Korea's got the best ginseng, and they've had it for a long time. Kaesong in North Korea has the best. So what happened, you know, ginseng grows here in America, and it's really, really good. But what happened is there was the first trade war between Korea and America was in China. And if you don't know this, the Revolutionary War in the United States was funded by the sale of American ginseng to China. And so this is the first economic interaction. They were fighting against the Koreans for selling ginseng to China. So by 1860, the United States had picked all of their ginseng, and they didn't know how to grow it. Koreans already knew how to grow it. So they brought, in 1860s, they brought Korean ginseng farmers to America to teach the Americans how to grow ginseng. So when people tell you that January 13th, 1903 is the exact day that the first Koreans came, it's wrong. And not only is it wrong, everybody that was not Korean, George Bush believed it, Cheney believed it, it became a big recognized holiday. I know the whole truth, I worked on it. And it's malarkey. And the other thing now, Korean American Day is based on the centennial. So you have people that don't know anything about history selling this idea across the United States, and it's not right. So it's a little bit about me. I went to a Catholic military academy. I'm the third one in the front row. So I have a different upbringing. I went to two of the best schools in the United States when I was a kid. I went to English prep school, I went to Harvard School, I played rugby, I played football, I was a senior class president. You know, so, and in those days, they considered me an Asian, whether I was half or not. The neighborhood I live in now, where my mom's house is, they had a petition to keep us out of the neighborhood. And that was in 1960. So this is me. I've met 8 of the 12 presidents of Korea. That's me meeting Park Chung-hee, and I had long hair. And so that guy in the back is a security guy. He's looking at me like, how come Park Chung-hee is shaking hands with this guy with long hair? Not only did I get racism for being half Asian, but I had long hair. I got hassled for that. But I served. Like, I've served every day this week. You know, I still serve. I've been doing, my mom made me learn how to serve. So anyways, they also told my sister that she couldn't wear pants because it was against the rules for women to wear pants. So my sister and I are laughing, and they wanted me to bow down to this guy. I'd already demonstrated against the Vietnam War. I wasn't bowing down to this military dictator. And so part of the problem was he opened Dosan Park, and a lot of people have a misconception that our family was ultra-conservative. Not true. Dosan was very liberal. Very traditionally minded, loved Korea, loved Koreans, loved Korean heritage, but liberal. And this is, I was in college, I studied hydrology. I did snow work so I could go skiing up in Mammoth. I used to live in Mammoth. But I learned a lot. So I had an office at the halfway house. And then, you know, this is a picture of Dosan in Riverside picking oranges. I worked in an avocado orchard. I know what happens in a citrus industry. And the other thing that was these pictures, when you see, they were posed pictures for a newspaper that Dosan started. He hardly picked oranges. He worked on the irrigation. So when you pick through all these little things, and we have all this evidence, letters that are written and everything, it's different than what teachers are teaching. I used to put on surf contests. I used to work for Red Bull. This is a contest I put on in Malibu where I did it at night and just lit the thing up. You know, I've done all kinds of crazy different stuff. My last big job was working at the the University of Hawaii Biomed Lab, testing, you ever been stung by a jellyfish? So I tested jellyfish things for a treatment to relieve the pain. I did that for 3 years, and ended up getting ripped off by the University of Hawaii when I came up with this formula. So, you know, and then I've done the Korea thing. In 2013, the people at Yonsei had no idea that Dosan went to Underwood School, so I got him an honorary diploma. But so that's just to show you a variety, and that's not even everything that I've done. But this is the other thing. Can anybody tell me what's wrong with this picture? But anyways, think about it. South Korea is about the size of this, oh, you get it? Right, exactly. So on maps, you'll see the Sea of Japan. It's supposed to be the East Sea. So that, you know, you can see how things have been changed through, and you know, people have organizations to try to catch these things. That was a good catch. So the population of Indiana is 6,650,000. The population of metropolitan Seoul is 25 million. The population of South Korea is approximately 51 million. And it's 1/7 of the population of the United States. But America is only 0.6 of the population. So when you look at the imbalance in what you have to deal with as far as politics, voting, and those kinds of things, but Koreans are strong. You know, Koreans, you know, and you look at almost probably 1 out of every 4 or 1 out of every 3 person in America probably owns a Korean brand. Hanguk tires, Samsung phone, appliances. When I was growing up, none of that. And so that's the mistake that you'll see sometimes that, you know, people don't go and correct things. So another thing that happens too, if you look at old cartoons, you know, sometimes this is about the Russian-Korean War. I mean, the Russian-Japanese War in Korea, and that's Theodore Roosevelt. So there's a lot of interesting history. That period of time really will tell you a lot about what went on and what goes on today. But Korea lost its freedom. August 29th, 1910 used to be a national holiday called Humiliation Day. They don't have that anymore. They tend to forget about all this stuff. So Koreans were slaves. Japanese would ask Koreans for their papers in Korea. So Korea really had lost its country. And these are the other things in the newspapers. Korea ends as a nation today on that day. So when my mom was growing up and my grandmother, there was no Korea. Korea was lost to Japan. My mom said we had no country. Then there's books. There's books. There's a book here that I brought for the raffle, Monse. It's a really good book. It was written in the 80s. This book, Pumpkin Flower and Patriotism, is about a Korean woman who was an underground messenger for the independence movement. And her mother was another underground messenger. And when the Japanese got her, when they caught her with some, they made a fire and threw her mother in the fire. And there was a circle of Japanese soldiers around it, and they kept pushing her into the fire to burn her until they thought she was dead. So they walked away, and Cha Kyung-soo is the sister that wrote this book. Cha Kyung-shin took hobak, the flowers, and made a salve out of the flowers to heal the burns and saved her mom's life. And then she came to Los Angeles. My grandfather was in Shanghai, sent her to Los Angeles, and she opened up a Korean school. In those days, they called it Kugo Hakyo. And that's my mom in 1926, over here on the corner studying Korean, like you guys. You know, this kind of heritage, this kind of teaching, this kind of culture thing has been going on ever since Koreans came here. And it's really important that TYP and the other people that are here do this for you, because you're not going to get this education in your schools. March 1st, Independence. Most of you know what this day is. I gave a speech a couple weeks ago to 20 kids in the Valley. None of them even knew what March 1st was. March 1st is the most important day in modern Korean history. It's the day when Korea not only protested against the Japanese occupation, it was all walks of life that got together to unify, to revolt against the unjust Japanese rule, which lasted from 1910 to 1945. And these are some of the demonstrations. You know, and Yu Gong-sun was a great hero, a young girl. You know, she died when she was 18, but she was a leader. And she, you know, got put in jail and got executed. But, you know, this is the kind of thing that was going on to save the country, is young people like you really got out and made their voices heard and wanted freedom. This is a parade that was part of that later in Philadelphia. The 100th year anniversary of March 1st is coming up next year. I have that flag in my house. It's going to be 100 years old. But Sojay Peel and some other patriots put this on. And then because of March 1st, my grandfather, who's in the middle, went to Shanghai, China to run the Korean Provisional Government before other officials got there. So Dosan also traveled around the world. He went on 2 trips. So what Dosan saw things different than a lot of people, because a lot of Koreans didn't have that vision or that experience from traveling. And this is my grandfather in 1898. You know, he started out as a traditional Korean, but westernized, even westernized his clothing, cut his hair. But here he's a teaching assistant at Yonsei Miller School, the Kusei Hakdan, which later became Yonsei University. This is his passport. When I talked to you about him coming here before 1903, right up in the corner, October 14th, 1902. That's passport number 51 and 52 from the king of Korea. And my grandmother was the second woman to come to America from Korea. I'm the third generation of the first Korean American family. You know, whether people like it or not, because I'm not full Korean, I speak a little bit of Korean or whatever. It's history. I'm standing here. I'm it. And so this is what my grandparents looked like when they came to San Francisco. They were westernized, wore Western dress. And in those days, it was like the Wild West. But without my grandmother, Dosan couldn't have done anything. Because he left all the time. She raised 5 kids, and she was the center of the community. Talking about tough, this woman was so tough. Now, one of the reasons my mom was a success and my grandmother did what she did is because, and these are reasons why some of the presidents of Korea will not follow Dosan's philosophy. In a book called The Song of Aridang by Nim Wales, you can read my grandfather's philosophy to a man that's going to get married, talking about equality for women. Women should have equal education, equal opportunity, and they should be protected, because my grandfather knew about the comfort women's situation long before 1930. And so, you know, when Park Chung-hee or any of these presidents, they could not support someone who treated women equally at that time. So, you know, you'll learn a little more about my mom, and you'll understand what I'm saying. Dosan means island mountain. So when Dosan was coming from Korea to America in 1902, after crossing the ocean, he saw Hawaii rise out of the water, and he felt that, you know, he was in a sea of upheaval, and he had to be strong and rise up like a mountain. And he also knew he was going to be alone. I think I got rid of the feedback. I'm standing too close to the mic. Sorry about that. So one guy in Korea says Dosan named himself after Kungun-san. It's kind of like, why do people do that kind of stuff, you know? And this is a guy at the Hungsadan, modern times. And this is what San Francisco looked like on October 14, 1902. I give tours of San Francisco. The apartment building that my grandparents first rented on October 16, 1902 is still there. And so in Chinatown there's this neat little area. San Diego has pioneer history as well. I'll talk a little bit about that later. And then this is my grandfather starting his first organization called the Chinmoke, which means Friendship Association, to help Koreans assimilate into American culture. You know, the immigration up until 1965 is totally different than the immigration post-1965. Some of the same feelings, some of the same loyalty, but as far as the mindset, and they were all South Koreans. When they came to see the Korean American pioneer community, most of us were from Pyongyang and spoke Pyongyang Sattari. And so basically the new immigrants, you know, we were palganging as far as they were concerned. We were all red communists. And so there was a real division why the community split. But that's one Korea, and then after 65, the immigrants are basically a divided Korea. These are places all over California where early Korean people were. Yes, there were people in Riverside, but Riverside is not the Mecca of independence. Mecca is a very special name. But, you know, people that are talking about that, it's not really instant new, but if it's anywhere in San Francisco. These are other things that are going on. You know, Korea today still is the same way. There's a saying, when whales fight, the shrimp back breaks. I can't say it in Korean, but that's Korea, the little shrimp, and they always get picked on. There's a book called The Foreign Destruction of Korean Independence, written by Carol Cameron Shaw. A lot of what she wrote is research that I did in the Independence Hall in Korea when I worked there. But what's interesting, do you know who the Rockefellers are? Is that name? Or the Carnegies, the Rothschilds? Those people all funded the Japanese army to fight the Russians in Korea. You know, that's why Japanese wanted the gold in Korea to pay back all these foreign people. So today there's even foreign influence on keeping Korea from having its independence. I don't consider South Korea a democracy. I don't consider North Korea anything. It's wrong. It should be one Korea for all Korean people. You know, and it's unfortunate. These are the kind of things of racism. There's a school that was built on Clay and Powell Street in San Francisco where all Asians had to go to school. But then when the Japanese signed the Treaty of 1910 with the Americans, Theodore Roosevelt removed the constrictions on Japanese. Koreans and Chinese still had to go there. Americans wanted the Asians out of the country. And then again later, this guy who was a senator, I mean, so this is the kind of fighting the Japanese and fighting racism is what pioneers went through. And they survived. They survived so you guys could be here today to listen to me talk about them. Then the Shinminhei, New People's Association, is another really important organization that had ideals starting here. And they went back, and these are great patriots and heroes. And so they had, this Shinminhei started schools, bookstores, and actually the Celadon factory was the first public joint stockholding company, and that's what my grandfather learned here. He started all these things. There's the Korean National Association, the Kunminhei. It was the first political organization that was represented after Durham White Stevens was assassinated in San Francisco. He was a Japanese publicist that was speaking against the Koreans, saying Koreans were stupid, making these speeches. And so basically, you know, Hong Myung-gi, Mike Hong, who's the head of the Dosan Memorial Foundation, gets up at the City Hall in Riverside and says, Dosan was a completely peaceful man like Gandhi. No way. My grandfather had people assassinated. My grandfather had an army. My grandfather had a military plan. You know, so people selectively use things. The reason you pick Gandhi is because Gandhi's statue is in Riverside near Tosan's, but it's not true. So all these organizations were the ones that gave money to the independence movement. And people will say, oh, Dosan talked all these people into giving their money and make a big romantic thing. It was patriotic. It was a taxation system that he set up that was completely financially, you know, just so sharp of a plan, you wondered who this guy was or how he got these ideals. This is the Hungsadan. It's a moral character training. No politics in this, but today the Hungsadan in Korea is very political. Dosan wanted to keep politics out of character training because when you start talking about politics, I don't know if it's down at your level, but if you go out with your parents sometimes, they start talking about politics and it doesn't work well, you might be going home early. You know? And it could be any kind of politics. So the Hungsadan was just for training. Now the other thing that's interesting, and it's another thing that Ed Chang wrote about, was the Willows Air Force. This is 1913. His Air Force starts in 1920. That bird, that's a bird. It's a goose. Geese all fly together. They have a leader. The front goose, when it flaps its wings, it makes it easier for the rest of the geese to fly. If the goose in front gets tired, another goose takes it over, their lead in the same direction. If one goose gets hurt, two goose will go down, whether it dies or comes back, and some homing thing will bring them back to their group. How did Dosan figure that out? That's the Hungsadan flag. It's a main part. But in this case, see the squared off fin and the pointed nose? That's an airplane. My grandfather organized that. My grandfather was here when the Wright brothers, you know who the Wright brothers are, the first flight? He was here when that happened. That impressed him. Dosan started the first newspaper in 1905 in America. So you know what newspapers are like laptops and internet to you guys. But you know, in those days, you know, so all this modern stuff, Dosan was brilliant. This is San Francisco. This is a tour that I give. Look at all those dots. They all have a historical significance. If I put a dot up here of Riverside, how many dots do you think it would have? One. And this is not the central part of Korean American history. Somebody's got it wrong. My grandfather went to Mexico. Was there for a year gathering money. There was another group of people that immigrated to Mexico in 1905 that were taken as slaves. And that's a whole nother history. But you know, so there was Koreans networking all around the world. This is Shanghai. You know, one thing, if you haven't noticed, who's the central figure in most of these pictures? Question? Or answer? Okay. Yeah. So that's the guy he was. You know, and I told somebody that Dosan was the most powerful person in the independence movement. And they said, he didn't have the money. He didn't have a college degree. He was honest. Everybody trusted him because he did what he said he would do. The socialists, the Democrats, that's his forte. And you cannot fight with these pictures, because there's great people in here. Kim Goo's over there, Shiniki. And what's funny with Han's great-grandfather, he's at my house one day and he goes, God, there's some reason I'm here. And so he whips out these pictures of his great-grandfather. And his great-grandfather's at Waseda University with the Korean students group in 1917. And he says, do you know anybody in these pictures? And I started naming off all these people. So Han's connected to Dosan. Crazy. The Dosan prison pictures. That's the picture that you saw that Yoo Suk was holding. You guys know who Yoo Suk is? Yeah. He was crying. Embarrassed. Because he didn't know what the Korean pioneers did for him and his freedom and all those guys. Ha too. Ha was married at Dosan Park and he had no idea Dosan was buried there. Crazy. How come? Dosan was in jail, in and out of jail 6 times. I don't know anybody else in the independence movement that did that. All of them went in and out of jail once or twice, but not like this. And this is I don't know, you know Dumbfounded? He's a musician. So this guy, Joseph Lee, and Matt Kim from Core, it's a clothing company called KORE, Keep Our Roots Eternal, came to the house one day and go, we want to do a mural. They didn't ask for money. They didn't have a big fundraiser. They didn't have any big anything. They said, we got the money, we're going to do it. They picked that picture and they put it up. And it's on Vermont and Wilshire in downtown. And it just happened. In the next 3 days, we had a mural up there. And what was odd was 1053 was the same address as Tosan's Kunminghae headquarters in San Francisco on Oak Street. So, there's little weird things that happen in life. So now we're switched to my mom. You saw my mom's quick interview, and I just wanted to get an image of her speaking. She did come up, it was great that Jessica was there, because Jessica took the very last video of my mom before she died. She died the next day. But my mom was amazing, just for what she did. So that's my mom when she was born in this house in Los Angeles. And so she's the first, one of the first Korean Americans to be born in Los Angeles. My uncle was born in Highland Park in 1905. But this is from rags to riches. Not riches, we never were wealthy, but rich in what she did with her life, rich as a leader, rich as a role model, and a historical figure. It's, persistence. A lot of people told her no. She didn't listen to no. And so this is the family portrait in 1917. This is a house in LA, the same house over there. So this is just to give you an idea of what era they were like. But they dress and look just like any other American. My mom was the president of her homeroom. She's second row, right in the middle, straight up from number 3. That's the kind of person she was. She was there was a play that they made about her called Born to Lead. But she also kept my grandfather said, be a good American citizen, but don't forget your heritage. She was born here. When Han met her, his first thought about her was, wow, this hominy speaks perfect English. He had no idea that she was born here, so it's kind of shocking. I wish she was here today. But she was an athlete. She played field hockey. She played baseball. She was the head, in 1935 or 6, she was the head, not only playing baseball, she was the head of baseball at LA City College. She had an opera, did any of you remember, it's an old movie called A League of Their Own. It's about women who play softball or baseball. Well, anyways, she had an offer to be a professional baseball player, but she turned it down to keep her amateur status. And my Aunt Emma, for the longest time, was the only person in the social worker's office in LA that spoke Korean. But again, in the immigration period after 1965, she quit because she spoke Gyeongyang Sathari and didn't understand the Gyeonggi-do dialect, and so there was a conflict, and so she quit. That's my mom. When I tell people my mom was a gunslinger, it's like, yeah, what'd your mom do? Take apart a 50 caliber machine gun, put it back together, teach guys how to shoot. And she was an officer. She was in charge. So My mom trained people to kill people in the war because it was a specific enemy, a specific situation. It's not like today. It's different. The U.S. Forces Korea chose her name to be on a conference room in the new Army headquarters in South Korea without asking us. My mom would have never wanted that. You know, so I'm in a fight with the Pentagon to get her name taken off of that. I'm fighting with the Korean government because it's not right. My mom worked on Vietnam and was, I'll show you in the Cold War, she quit the National Security Agency because of what was going on in Vietnam. My mom didn't want to have anything to do with Koreans killing Koreans or Americans killing Koreans. So I'm fighting, always fighting, you know, with these people because they're just using history for their own benefit. And the South Korean government's in on it too. But it's not right. Dosan is North Korean, whether you like it or not. He ended up in South Korea as a South Korean quote-unquote hero because the Japanese made him be buried there. But, you know, hometown. Your allegiance, basically, in your tradition is to your hometown. That's mine, you know. I'm not North Korean as far as communism and that kind of stuff, but I feel for my family there. They're just normal people. And there's normal people in South Korea. If this war happens, millions of people are going to die because America and these other people are still messing around with the independence like Theodore Roosevelt did. And a lot of people you see on TV, CNN, don't believe anything an expert on Korean stuff tells you, you know, because they're all paid to play. They don't have anybody out there that's not paid. And then this is my dad. When I would go places with my dad and he'd introduce me as a son, they'd go, nice for you to adopt this kid. You know, but my dad spoke Japanese fluently. And he was at National Security Agency, but he was responsible in World War II for breaking the code at Midway. And if you don't know world history, Midway was a battle between the Japanese and the American Navy after Pearl Harbor. And they sent a fake code about a water leak, and they watched how it went back because they knew a couple words. And so he was in Hawaii with this group of guys, and they broke the code because if they didn't break that code and defeat the ships there, most likely the Japanese would have won the Pacific War. And then I found a medal that my dad got, the paperwork that went with it. You know, it commends them for the group for their work, but it said you can't show this to anybody because it's top secret. But my dad was, and he was a boxer, and he was a great guy. This is my mom at the National Security Agency. In the Cold War, she was in charge of 300 people. Now, I was looking at my mom's jacket, you know, her portfolio after she died, and was looking at her report card from San Diego State. I went to UC Santa Barbara, but really wasn't serious about school. I wanted to go surfing and enjoy my time in college. And so I didn't get the best grades, so I go, no wonder. I was looking at my mom's grades, I go, no wonder she didn't bag on me for having bad grades. Hers weren't that good. But then I'm going, my mom was really smart. And how can she be in charge of all these Ivy League and foreign scholars? Well, what happened at San Diego State, there was only one other Asian person in the entire college when she was there, a Japanese American one. And my mom had help from Jewish people in the community. The family all had help from Jewish people in LA. And so this woman, Sylvia Yellen, who was my mom's friend from junior college on, I knew her really well, was in a class with my mom, and my mom was getting bad grades but writing good papers. So Sylvia was getting straight A's all the time. So my mom put her name on Sylvia's paper and turned it into the professor, and she got a C. It's prejudice. So most of my mom's grades were bad because the teachers at San Diego State didn't like Asians. There weren't any Asians there. So my mom wasn't, you know, my bad grades were my bad grades. I didn't have an excuse like that. So it's interesting what happened. But so in 1959, what my mom saw was the parallel between An Chang-ho and Ho Chi Minh, you know, of patriots trying to save their own country from foreign influence. And so she quit. I know a lot of things about the Korean War and about Vietnam that nobody knows. So my mom got all kinds of awards and stuff. This is Kurt Weston and Mark Ridley Thomas, who are not examples of what you should follow as politicians. became really close friends with my mom because after the riots, we had no connection to an African-American politician. So Mark used my mom used him. Unfortunately, recently, Mark gave $100,000 to United Way out of his campaign funds, gave it to USC, and USC funneled it to Mark Ridley Thomas's son, who was teaching a class. That's not very honest or ethical. Herb Wesson is just another story. He's the city council person for Koreatown, and my mom hated him. I'll just leave it. Then my mom got the American Courage Award in Washington D.C., which was great because go back to Washington D.C. to get this award. It's funny because down below, when she first showed up, that's Norma Mineta, the former Secretary of Transportation, and Walter Dellinger, who was an attorney who helped Laotian people in Louisiana. And so this group recognizes, multi-Asian things. And so they both saw this little old Korean lady, or Asian, they probably didn't know she was Korean. And they're like, what's she doing here? My mom gave one of the most dramatic speeches I've ever seen her give. And afterwards, Mineta and everybody was trying to come up and get in a picture with her. And, finally, when they heard her story. And my mom still gets recognized. There's that picture again. But, she would do role model things for McDonald's. This is recently, somebody was driving by New York Times Square for Women's History Month. And they have her picture up there. So she's still, and as you guys will learn, she still has things to teach you or examples of how to live your life. And one of the things my mom, because of the McDonald's picture, she didn't like McDonald's, she loved In-N-Out. And so this, I think she's 98 years old here. My mom lived a full life up until being 100. But, okay, so I'm done at 12?
No, we have you until 12:15.
Oh, okay, good. Questions and answers?
Yeah, from 12:15 to 20.
Oh, okay. Well, I crammed a lot of stuff in here, and like I said, I don't want you to memorize this stuff. I hope what it did is just kind of give you an idea that there's some people and there's history out there, there's heritage out there that you can access. I'm getting help with the websites. There's books and things that I can recommend. There's papers. We're doing more now, and I've had more help than I've had before. And with events like this, it's an advantage and a benefit to me, so I can come here and talk to you guys. But for me, all week long I served. I worked in a wood shop. I'm a carpenter. It doesn't matter whether I'm Korean or not. But it's at times like this, it's the most important thing to me, is to be here. To try to share with you something that I know. And it's a good story. It's all, like my mom became the person she was because of the philosophy of Dosan. Not only about life and history and patriotism, Christianity, doing good things, but how he felt as a Korean man in a kind of a complicated Korean tradition of treating women. He was the opposite. So what I feel too is that, the Korean education system is a mess. A couple of years ago, I rewrote part of the Korean history textbooks. And when I first got involved with that project, the government produced 3 Korean textbooks. There were 700 mistakes in these 3 books. And it was about all kinds of history. So I corrected the ones about my grandfather. There was 3 major ones. But I didn't want to get involved with the Korean Teachers Association, which I know and appreciate. I didn't want to get involved with the Korean government, so I did it through the press. And so it worked out. And and the other thing is accuracy in history. If I make a mistake and somebody tells me, and it could be anybody, it could be you, I would listen to it. Say I found this on the internet or somebody taught me this, and I would go back and say, okay, I was wrong, I'll change my mind. But that's very rare. I'm not being egotistical about it. I've put that much time into this. It's my life. But so I'm just fortunate to have this kind of a heritage. And The other thing too, when you talk about North Korea, is my grandfather's sister, An Shin-ho, was the vice chairwoman of the Women's Workers' Party in the 40s and 50s. She's buried in the National Cemetery in Pyongyang for her patriotism and revolution, not for her Marxist or the Stalinist communism, the bad things that Kim Jong-un is doing, but to help save Korea. So and also Dosan is respected in North Korea. I think Dosan in our family is the only one that's respected on both sides of the DMZ. But any questions? Sure.
You said that headquarters was in Los Angeles. I thought that was
Oh, he traveled all over the place. If let me see. So if you look here, you'll see Shanghai right in here. Oh wait, no, down here, right there, that's Shanghai. Up there is Russia. Dosan went everywhere. And so he was, had this network of people all over the world that were fighting for Korean independence. But so most of the time he spent, well, put it this way, from 1907 to 1911, let me start all over. From 1902 to 1907, he was in California, establishing the community. In 1905, there was a protective treaty after the Russian-Japanese War, and Theodore Roosevelt gave control of Korea to the Japanese. So he was here watching this, and being in America, you could see, reading the newspapers and seeing what was going on here, where people in Korea really didn't understand that. So in 1907, he went back to start the Shinminhae, was there till 1911, and you know who An Chung-gun is? An Chung-gun is the guy that shot Ito Hirobumi. I was on the phone with An Chung-gun's great-grandson for 3 hours the other night. So it's really amazing to talk to him about what he does. So my grandfather got arrested for the assassination and then escaped and went from San Francisco, from Vladivostok up here across Siberia, Russia, into Germany, and into England, and ended up back in New York in 1911. So in 1911 till 1915, he was here. 1915, he went to Hawaii, came back. 1917, he went to Mexico from 1917 to 1918. And then in 1919, because of March 1st, is when he went to Shanghai. He was in Shanghai till 1924, came here till 1926. In 1925, he was arrested in Chicago because the Syngman Rhee people and other people in the Tongjiang here who were anti-Dosan told the American government that he was a Bolshevik and a threat to American security. So that's how I found it. Dosan was 5'10", he was my height. Because when I looked on his arrest report, I never knew how tall he was. He seemed tall. So he went all over the place. In 1926 was the last time he left, the last time my mom ever saw him when she was 11. Sure.
Why did Chinese?
In the old days, Chinese was the official language.
That's like before when he made it.
Well, no, even up until recently, Chinese is used in official, like, when you sign, your Hangul name these days is more accepted, but in the old days, you had to sign in Hanja or Hanmin. Oh, and this is a funny fact. I'm at the Korean Research Institute in Namsan, and I'm talking to a German guy, and he hands me his business card, and I'm gonna write down something on the back. I reach over the receptionist, I grab a red pen. You know the red pen story? So I start to write his name in red pen, and she grabs it and goes, "You can't, because that's the death that, red is what you write dead people." So I looked at her, and I go, "Okay, how come everybody's Tojong is a red stamp?" So it's funny things like that. You're just kind of going like, that doesn't, she had no answer. But having a degree in anthropology makes me ask funny questions. you know, so he traveled all over the place, but he spent a lot of time in Shanghai. And Shanghai is important, but San Francisco, as far as the independence movement, more important than Shanghai. San Francisco is the most important city of all independent cities in Korean history, because that's where the money came from. And that's where the headquarters here were. Question?
How is San Diego significant in the Korean independence?
It's a satellite city where there was agriculture groups that went around that worked down here. It didn't have a Korean National Association headquarters, but a lot of people came in. My mom came down here, but Dosan was here because when he was coming back from Mexico, and when other immigrants were coming from Mexico, they had to go through San Diego. So, you know, San Diego was just another place where Korean history can be found. There's got to be somebody that I haven't found that has a real prominent history here of doing something. But just the fact that Dosan was in this town, my mom came here to be educated, that's our tie to the San Diego network. And there's Dosan's statue, which was made in San Francisco. That's a whole nother controversy, but that was made in 1999 or 2000 down here. Any questions? Yes?
It's slightly off topic, but
Sure.
what was the relationship like between the early Korean Americans from the 1900s with other Asian Americans, Japanese American community, with the Chinese American?
Japanese American community, for the most part, was conflict. And the conflict began, besides the political things that happened in 1905 and 1910, was labor. Because the Japanese had the grip on labor in the citrus industry. The Chinese had more people, but I think the Japanese were more cunning, you know, and so they controlled a little more, because I remember reading things about my grandfather having to negotiate against Japanese for labor, and Dosan always undercut everybody for labor. And then the Chinese in Chinatown in San Francisco, with their network fighting the Japanese, worked with some of the Korean independence organizations. And then later on, it's either Kilsuhan or Nuilhan had a group called Sino-Korean League, and they were working probably in the 30s more. But, you know, then the kids that grew up, you know, even especially when they went to Manzanar and stuff, there's a whole group of Asian kids that all got together really well because they were just Asians against a Caucasian group. So there was a lot of interaction, but boy, I tell you, there was a lot of hate between the Japanese and the Koreans. Go ahead.
If like Japan, like there was World War II going on at the time,
Uh-huh.
so like they took like all the metal things and made them into bullets and stuff. Is there a possibility that Japan could have used this as a passage for tools?
You mean the metal?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You're going to be a Korean history professor. What happens is there was even, like, in the old days, America was giving scrap metal to Japan. And there was Korean groups that had demonstrations to stop the scrap metal from America going to Japan because they were making boats and bullets and things like you said. But the Japanese did everything they could to obliterate Korean culture. Like, if you go to Sodaemun, Gyeongmuso Yotsugwan, the Sodaemun Prison History Hall, if you ever visit, it's a sad education, but it's a good education. The Japanese used to take metal spikes and pound them into the top of mountaintops because, you know, in the Mudong or the shamanism of Korea, like traditional, you know, everything had a spirit. And so the Japanese figured by pounding these metal stakes into the top of these mountains, they were killing spirits. So they did all kinds of stuff, but yeah, it was, you know, I do atrocity speeches, and I've had people walk out because it's so graphic what the Japanese did. And you know, it's on comparison to what the Nazis did to the Jewish people. but it's just not known because there's so much involvement by the American government. Even with the comfort women issue, with Unit 731. So, and that's never really been taught clearly. Sure.
Okay, I have a question here. So, I'm going to speak from a sort of, I come from the Muslim community, I'm a second generation Muslim American, and I see the history that's developing today and the lack of knowledge of history. People don't know much about what's happening in the Middle East, they don't know about Middle Eastern culture. And what I try to do is gain knowledge about other immigrant experiences. But I remember growing up, my history books were probably like 1,000 pages long. 1 page on what happened to the Chinese Americans. Half a page on the Japanese internment camp experience. Maybe 2 pages on slavery. And then I go to the university, and you take classes on philosophy. It's Western philosophy. You don't learn about Eastern philosophy. And if there are professors who teach about Asian studies or African American studies, some of them have some bias. And then the media gives you a certain slant of things. You mentioned this is the stuff we don't learn in schools. Do you think there should be maybe like a specific schools independent of these universities to teach these histories? What's your solution?
Well, on some of the podcasts we've done, and we call it pay to play, because like here with the Koreans, who are, to me, the worst violators of it I've seen on academia, if you get funded by Samsung or by the Overseas Korean Foundation, you cannot say really what you want to say because you'll lose your funding. I've criticized every Korean studies, I blatantly criticized every Korean studies department in the United States. If they were doing their job, we wouldn't be in this situation today. There would be no North and South Korea. When you see, I think you're Sumi Terry, she's ex-CIA. She's the person that's giving the one-sided view on what goes on in Korea. For the longest time, when they were saying there was going to be war, there'll be 10,000 people die. In 1999, the Department of Defense put out a thing that said 1 million people will die the very first day. How does it drop? So there's those kinds of things that control. So I'm not paid. This one guy calls me the most dangerous person in Koreatown because I say whatever I want. And mostly what I say, I have proof of what I say. Because we don't know enough about other cultures. But we, with the handheld stuff, the technology, the globalization, that's what I meant about the ball of lies. Is through social media, you guys have to wade through so much more stuff to really find the truth, and the lies are convincing. Like what the Russians did with the election. And so information, you really have to seek the truth. And, of course, the stuff that goes on with the Muslims. That kind of fear, that went on with the Japanese, the Koreans, and me being half, I sit in rooms where people talk about Koreans, and I sit in rooms where people talk about white people. When I worked at the administrator at the Good Samaritan Hospital, I directly sat in the middle between the Koreans and the whites. And it was my responsibility to mediate some stuff. But, I think there should be like when I went to college, it was $242 for a quarter. The state was paying. Now it's money that comes in from corporate, government grants. So education is as open-minded, as free as it should be. So there should be some kind of a truth center. Yes?
What's the difference between Japan versus Russia, and Japan versus China?
Okay, in the old days or today? Old days. Russia, in the winter, is surrounded by ice. Not now with climate change. That's why they've become so much more bold. So in those days, that meant Russia had to depend on other countries to get commodities, to get goods, clothing, food, oil, whatever it would be. So there's a place in Korea on the Port Arthur, and it's a warm water port. Russia wanted that part of Korea to put a warm water port So they didn't have to work with other countries. China, that piece of peninsula is geographically important, and it's a buffer between China and Japan. And so the other thing that's funny, the United States influences on who does what, but have you ever heard of the Freemasons? Okay, so I have a theory that the Freemasons are part of the Presbyterian Church, and the Freemasons wanted to control Korea to expand Presbyterian religion to become more popular than Catholic religion. Because there's a whole network of 1902, David Deschler is the guy that organizes the illegal transportation of Koreans to Hawaii that the Centennial started on. He was a Freemason. 1907, there's a big Presbyterian revival of religion in Pyongyang by a great missionary, great friend of Korea, Samuel Moffat. He was a Freemason. The Hanyang Lodge in Korea is 100 years old. The head guy in Riverside at the Chapa Camp Church, John Bailey, he was a Freemason. So this, and these people are connected to a thing that Soje Peel started in Korea called the Independence Club, which is about democracy. It was the real change. That's one of the most important things there. So there's all these, so like later on in life, I don't know if you remember, but the USSR used to be when that collapsed, Osama bin Laden worked with Jimmy Carter with the Afghan rebels to stop the Russians from getting a warm water port. So this warm water port in Pakistan to the Indian Ocean was the same political value as Port Arthur was, Deer Harbor, to the Russians in Korea. So believe it or not, you'll get a lot of things that are controlled in history and politics and life that are bound by geography and geopolitical is what it's called. Yes?
Two questions that kind of relate to each
Sure.
other. You could ask your grandfather a question to help you today. What would it be? And what should we ask our parents who are first or second generation immigrants?
Those are good questions. I think if to Dosan, truth today is relative. Truth is not the truth. You know, truth is the truth, but people are taking truth and making it relative, which means they're stretching it to fit their own needs. So my question to my grandfather is, how do we make the truth again? And I think, the question to your parents is good because it relates to a lot of kids that I talk to. And that one question sometimes it's open, sometimes it's a great discussion, and sometimes it's conflict. And it's when you ask your parents, why did you leave Korea to come to the United States? There's a variety of reasons. A lot of it is for my kids, for their education. I've seen every different wave of immigration come with every change of the president. People escaped Korea to keep their money when a new person became president, and when that person became, other people escaped to keep their money from getting persecuted politically that way. So there's situations like that. And the immigration, I find, with recent parents is much different than the immigration from the 70s. So a lot of times when you ask your parents why they came, they might not tell you. So I think, one of the things, if you're an American immigrant, you really have to know why you came here. It's like with the people that are coming through, I know El Salvadorans. I've been to Central America. The guy that ran Iran-Contra, Donald Gray, is the same guy, do you know Gwangju, the Gwangju incident in Korea? He's the same guy that ran that. That's, if you don't know this stuff, like somebody asked me to go to a speech to honor this guy. I said, do you know who he is? And it was the Korean American Coalition. I'm going, this is amazing. You don't know your politics? So, there's a lot of things. But yeah, the real thing is you have to know why you're here. You know, and whether it's good, bad, or whatever, you know, because that's part of your identity. And, you know, or I'm working on a project with the guy that's an artist doing a film, and his father, this girl's father, the girl is crying. She's learning a lot of good things in westernization. Her father is arguing with the artist saying, I don't care what you learn here. You're going to do everything the Korean way because that's the way it is. But you're in America. How do you stop your kid from being exposed to other ideals? You know, it's not as much as it used to be, but, you know, and it goes back to, if you don't know your history, you're not going to understand this. And I don't expect anybody in here to know it as well as I do, but it's my obligation. You know, when my grandfather's on a stamp, when there's a park in Korea after him, when people use his name for politics and money, my grandmother trained me to be the watchdog, you know, and my mom, I was like my mom's bodyguard, you know, but, so those are important questions, but I think it's just, you know, and then again, I respect the right of parents not to say anything, but it does come into the realm of conflict.
So are you saying that people are manipulating information to like feed the
Absolutely. That's, you know, that's what seeking the truth is all about, you know. Not everybody has to do it. I mean, a lot of people just get along in life, you know, but, you know, when you're in a minority, or you think you're different, or things are happening to your community that you don't like, the more you know about yourself, the more you know about heritage, the more you know how long Korean Americans have been here, those things kind of help you deal with some stuff. Not everything, but so history's good, you know, in those ways. And you know, like when I gave a talk, Jenny and Mrs. Kim invited me to speak at the National Korean Studies Seminar, and you know, they did a great program all on art and culture. You know, silk, embroidery. My mom's name, Dosan, means embroidered silk. No, embroidered mountain. My aunt, Sura, means embroidered silk. But, you know, I'm just amazed by Korean art and all those kinds of things. And so when I got up there, I said, you know, all that stuff's great and beautiful and nice. I'm here to talk to you about history, which is painful. You know, so that's the way it is. But, any more questions? Yeah.
Was your mother involved in any way with like feminism or civil rights for Asian Americans or Korean Americans at all?
Korean American stuff, but civil rights, women's stuff, no. They led by example. You know, I mean, my sister's an attorney. She was one of the first non-white people to go to Harvard, Radcliffe, and she got a lot of prejudice there. But she wasn't a, you know, they just, in Dosan the same way, they led by example. Because definitely they did things that were role models for feminists. But also in those days, my mom would say there's no racism. Even though what we see as racism today, because there was no choice. You know, like when I lived, 1960, I moved into a neighborhood in the San Fernando Valley, there's a petition to keep us out of the neighborhood. There's nobody of color there. You know, so I had to just, you know, I fought a lot. I remember, you know, I don't do what I do, but you know, when I got a little bigger, I would go back up to a kid that gave me a hassle and punch him right in the face. And they go, "What's that for?" I go, "Remember when you called me a Jap when I told you I wasn't a Jap, I'm Korean?" You know, they didn't know what a Korean was. You know, so, but just, you know, so my mom would not say that. Oh, here's another, like, when she was in the Navy and these hot pilots came back and she was teaching them how to shoot guns and fly planes and stuff, one guy came down and said, you know, "I'm not shooting until I see the whites of the Japanese eyes." My mom just said, "I don't care what you do up there. What you do down here, you do what I tell you to do because I'm in charge." You know, so you know, I don't know if she was a man, if she was, or whatever, but, you know, they just did those things. I mean, you know, for my mom to play sports as a Korean girl in the 30s, what is it, Yamjinhae? You know, my uncle wanted my mom to be Yamjinhae, and my mom said, but my grandmother convince them to play sports, because if you were an athlete and you played well, everybody liked you. You know, it didn't matter what color you were. She played second base. As long as she was getting people out and getting base hits, she was cool. And so my grandmother realized, because my grandfather started baseball in Korea in the early 1900s. He had a song about baseball called Yaguya. But what it does, baseball, you're an individual, but you're a part of a team. Different than football. You know, and he felt that it was a good way to teach people how to be organized sports. So, and my sister's the same way. My sister is, you know, was it J.K. Rowling? Harry Potter? My sister's flying to New York to meet with her next weekend, her attorney. Game of Thrones, do you watch Games of Thrones? I don't. That R.R. Martin is my sister's attorney. So my sister went through a lot. She graduated from Stanford Law School, number 3 in her class. If she was a man, she would have probably been number 1. But they just, you know, a lot of times you can make a statement by just example. Me, my statements are in your face. With examples of what's true in history. God, the prejudice I've got in Korea, just, you know, being a half. I think they used to call it tigi? Tigi? You know, so it means, you know, do you know what, anybody know what it means? It means half donkey, half cow. So this Korean guy called me that, and I go, what are you, the cow or the donkey? Neither one is complimentary, you know. Or I remember when I first went to Korea, and I asked, "Tukar, what do you sell?" And they go like, what? I didn't know what a hwajeonsil was. I go, I don't have makeup. I was thinking about hwajeonpum, you know. And so they go, oh, that's Pyongyang Sakuri. They don't even use Gyeongso anymore. So, you know, so you get these just weird situations, but I didn't let it bother me. And the other thing is, when I first started to be able to read Korean when I was at Yonsei, we'd go into Shincheon to the restaurants. And you know how the restaurants, they write the stuff up and down? So me being Mr. Smart, now I can read Korean characters. I read the first character across this way. So it was like, if it was going to be B, you know, so instead of bibimbap or kalbi, I was going across spelling it wrong. You know? So, you know, it's just, but, you know, you can't let that, I mean, it bothers you. I mean, I know what it's like to be an immigrant after I lived in Korea for 2 years. I've been to Korea 60 times. From 1973 to 1999, I went all the time. I wanted to marry a Korean girl. Father said, no, I'm half Korean. Not letting that guy in our family. Didn't matter who I was related to. You know, so racism, feminism, those kinds of things. You know, I was heartbroken, but, you know, I went on with my life. Any other
questions? I think we'll take one more.
Somebody from over here, come on. I'll tell you this one. I gave a speech at this West Hills thing, and the head of the speech was late. And this group is very organized. Information is very good. I like the whole thing. They didn't tell me much about what was going on. So she comes, I was there for 4 hours. I have 45 minutes left. She comes in, introduces, and says, who are the 3 best students? And I go, I have no idea. Not one of them asked a question. I have no criteria. So she tells me, and she goes, well, there's a prize at the end of this thing. And I go, if you would have told me that, I could have handed this out like a carrot, you know, and dangled it. And so I said, okay, kids, I just found out I'm supposed to pick the top 3 students, start asking questions. You know, one kid, I showed a picture of me surfing, and he goes, what's the biggest wave you ever rode? And I'm like, that doesn't count. You know? So anyways, it does. And a lot of times I intimidate people by talking, I know that, you know, and I'm not an authoritarian, I kind of act like it because I know a lot. But you can ask Han, when I'm at home, you know, or surfing or anything like that, it's, you know, I guess I'm more Irish than or something, I don't. But, one more? Over here, come on, how about you? Yes. I wear size 11 shoes. How's that? Oh, yeah.
In what way should they describe him to be outside of just Korean
Oh, that's a good point. Dosan was a social reformer for Korea before he was an independence activist. That's what people, and I have that on my notes, and that's a very good last question. So of course, independence activist is the thing. But in 1898, he's standing in front of the governor of Pyongyang, giving a speech on how corrupt the government is to the public, which is unheard of. This group, the Independence Club, they taught people debate, which was never, there was never any public discussion of Korea's king's policy. There's no word in Korean for debate. They were called the yes-no meetings. And so Dosan wanted to reform the education system, the relationship with women. Dosan also had workers' rights, so, and the example again with women's equality. So these are the things, and they all just pigeonhole him into independence movement. But the character training, if you read the character training from the Hunsudan, don't get involved with the Hunsudan today. I mean, they don't do what they're supposed to do. I'll post like the articles of incorporation or what the Hunsudan should be. Those are the things about character, about, critical thinking, independent thinking. I have a group of kids, this is their 5th trip. They come from Namseol University in Cheonan, in kind of the central part of Korea. Hell Chosun, you know that term? Hell Chosun is what the kids in Korea call Korea. The #1 cause of death in Korea for youth between the ages of 15 and 24 is suicide. My grandfather was all about youth, making life better for youth. Those are the kinds of things that the Korean government needs to pay attention to. And so Dosan wanted to reform a lot of this, and like I said earlier, the honorific form is being Korean, which probably kills everybody. What do you say, 안녕히 주무십시오, cha, whatever it is. Dosan wanted everybody to be on the same level, and you earned your merit. That's kind of a Christian thing, which makes sense, because if you're an Andan Kim, or you're a Seoul E, or whatever, you're a Yang. Dosan was not a Yangbang. Dosan was a shepherd family. Dosan was a normal guy that outdid all of these rich people. So it conflicts with Korean tradition that's prominent in today's government. And the other thing is, you know what a Chinonpa is? Chinonpa is a Korean who collaborated with the Japanese during the occupation. I'd say 50, 60, 75% of the National Assembly are all Chinonpa. So it's a whole different kind of a life. But there's so much to this. Korean history is really interesting. Even if it's just the history of sewing and embroidery and silk. And it's a long history. And it's an important history because today, North Korea is the most important geographical spot on earth basing on what happens in these negotiations. So if people knew that Dosan was respected on both sides of the DMZ, maybe he has some influence on making peace. But, the South Koreans want to keep him. The North Koreans don't want to talk to him. I'll make this the last thing about North Korea. The North Korean CIA comes to our house. And I just had dinner with some North Koreans the other night that people don't even know who they are. And with the difference is not that big. Because, some of you probably have relatives in North Korea. They're just people. Like I said before, those, we want, I want to do something that is unification. And to get that message across, I think somehow An Chung-gun's great-grandson and I talked about going to North Korea, just the two of us. You know, what would anybody say about, I mean, if you know, An Chung-gun is probably more popular than An Chang-ho, you know, but what An Chung-gun did doesn't amount to what An Chang-ho did, you know, overall. But to have those two, us two go, I think would be something big, and you know, I don't know if that's the right thing to think, you know, but I have to think sometimes as a North Korean, you know, but I don't know, but I guess we're out of time for the questions.
We have one last comment.
Oh, okay.
So I just want to say thank you. It was inspiring.